Let me paint you a picture, and buckle up, because this one's beautifully tragic. 1999, a sport sedan and a sport coupe, both making exactly 200 horsepower, both hitting 60 miles per hour in 6.9 seconds. 6.9, the same damn number. One was Detroit trying desperately to prove it understood the word sophisticated. The other was Honda reminding America that VTEC wasn't just a bumper sticker. It was a religion. They were perfectly matched, evenly balanced, genuinely competitive. And then, plot twist. America ignored both of them and bought Explorers instead. This is the story of two brilliant cars that lost to cup holders. The Ford Contour SVT arrived in 1998 as Ford's midlife crisis on wheels. "We can build European sophistication," shouted the executives, who'd apparently been to Germany once and thought they understood the entire continent. Ford's special vehicle team, the same crew that made the Mustang Cobra fast and the Lightning terrifying, took the Mondeo platform, slapped in a 2.5-liter Duratec V6, bolted on a 5-speed manual, and tuned the suspension on actual German roads. The result? Motor Trend called it the best-handling front-drive sedan in America, which sounds impressive until you remember the competition was the Dodge Stratus. Meanwhile in Japan, Honda's engineers were doing what they always did, making Americans feel inadequate about displacement. The fifth-generation Prelude's 2.2-liter inline-4 made exactly 200 horsepower by 1999, proving displacement wasn't destiny. That's 91 horsepower per liter. Ford's V6, 80 horsepower per liter. Honda was extracting more power from less metal, and doing it so reliably that teenagers could beat on them for 200,000 miles. Variable valve timing and lift electronic control, VTEC, was Honda's way of saying we don't need your extra cylinders, and they were, annoyingly, correct. So when these two met in showrooms in 1999, something unprecedented happened. Detroit and Japan accidentally built the same car using completely opposite philosophies. Same power, same speed, similar price tags. Ford used a V6 and European suspension tuning. Honda used a 4-cylinder and variable valve timing sorcery. Both were brilliant. Both were doomed. Because while engineers were arguing about cam profiles and spring rates, American buyers were in Ford and Honda showrooms, pointing at SUVs. The late 1990s were peak import war insanity. Honda, Toyota, and Nissan had spent 2 decades proving that made in Japan meant lasts forever and handles better. The Civic had embarrassed every American compact. The Accord had made the Taurus look like a rental car. By 1998, Detroit was in full panic mode. "We need to prove we can build cars enthusiasts actually want," said the executives. "Also, can someone check if handling is a real thing or just something European magazines made up?" Ford's strategy was simple. Take the European Ford Mondeo, which wasn't terrible, and Americanize it. Then, plot twist. Let SVT un-Americanize it. The Contour SVT got Eibach springs, Coney dampers, bigger anti-roll bars, and Goodyear Eagle F1 tires that cost more than the average American's monthly cable bill. Ford actually sent engineers to Germany's most demanding test routes, not on vacation, to work. This wasn't Detroit copying Japan. This was Detroit trying to be Germany, while still being assembled in Kansas City. The cognitive dissonance was palpable. Under the hood sat Ford's Duratec 2.5-liter V6, aluminum block, aluminum heads, double overhead cams, variable intake runners. In 1998 trim, it made 195 horsepower. Ford looked at that number and thought, close enough. Then for 1999 they remembered how to count and bumped it to 200. Power went through a Getrag 5-speed manual, from the same supplier BMW trusted for the 3 Series. Ford was basically saying, we're just as good as BMW, which would have been more convincing if the interior wasn't mostly hard plastic. Motor Trend's March 1998 test clocked 6.9 seconds to 60. 6.9. Quarter mile in 15.3 seconds at 91 miles per hour. Car and driver got 7.1, close enough for government work. Top speed? 143 miles per hour, electronically limited. because Ford's lawyers were terrified someone might actually enjoy themselves. These weren't Corvette numbers. They weren't even Mustang GT numbers. But they were honest. No turbo lag, no excuses. Just a naturally aspirated V6 doing exactly what Ford promised, which was refreshing considering Ford's track record with promises. MSRP, $22,995. That bought you the performance, Recaro seats that hugged you like an overly affectionate relative, and fog lamps that actually worked. A genuine miracle for Ford. For context, a Mustang GT cost $20,300. The Contour SVT was more expensive than a Mustang. Ford was asking customers to pay a premium for sophistication over displacement, which is like asking Americans to choose salad over steak. Bold, misguided, doomed from the start. Honda's Prelude had been making displacement irrelevant since 1978, which is when Honda decided that 2 liters was plenty if you knew what you were doing. By 1997's 5th generation, VTEC wasn't new, but Honda had perfected it to the point of mechanical poetry. The H22A engine was 2.2 liters of, "We don't need your V6." DOHC. VTEC on intake and exhaust cams. Below 5,800 RPM, it was a civilized commuter engine. Above that, it transformed into a mechanical banshee that screamed to 7,400 RPM while Honda engineers laughed at everyone who thought displacement mattered. In 1999 trim, it made exactly 200 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. 200. The same output as Ford's V6, from 300 cubic centimeters less displacement. 156 pound-feet of torque at 5,250. That torque number is hilariously low. But who cares when you have VTEC? 91 horsepower per liter. Ford needed 300 cubic centimeters more engine to match Honda's output. That's embarrassing. The transmission? A cable-actuated 5-speed manual that shifted like it was machined by Swiss watchmakers with OCD. It was mechanical perfection, and a constant reminder that American transmissions felt like stirring oatmeal. Car and driver tested the Prelude Type SH, that's the one with Honda's witchcraft torque vectoring system, and clocked 6.9 seconds to 60. 6.9, the same as the Contour SVT. Motor Trend got 7.0. Road and Track recorded 15.3 at 91 in the quarter. The numbers clustered around the Fords like moths to a very specific flame. This wasn't coincidence. This was automotive destiny. 2 completely different approaches arriving at the exact same speed, which proves either both were brilliant or both were equally mediocre. I'll wait while you process the fact that Detroit and Japan accidentally built the same car, using completely opposite engineering. The Prelude's 1998 base MSRP, $23,695, $700 more than the Ford. The Type SH with the torque vectoring system, $26,195. But here's the beautiful tragedy. Both cars competed in the exact same price bracket. You could walk into either dealership with 23 grand and drive out in a 200 horsepower sport coupe with a manual transmission. The choice wasn't financial, it was philosophical. Do you trust Detroit's European vacation or Honda's displacement denial therapy? Ford's approach: throw displacement at the problem until it surrenders. 2.5 liters making 80 horsepower per liter wasn't revolutionary, but it made torque down low and didn't require an engineering degree to maintain. Honda's approach: extract maximum violence from minimum displacement using Japanese engineering wizardry. 2.2 liters making 91 horsepower per liter was impressive, but you had to beat it like it owed you money to access the power. One philosophy said, "Why work harder when you can use more metal?" The other said, "Displacement is for quitters." The Contour SVT's personality was all European restraint with American compromises. That Duratec V6 made torque by 4,000 RPM. You didn't need to redline it to merge onto highways. The suspension, tuned in Germany by people who understood roads, preferred smooth pavement but wouldn't kill you on broken asphalt. Motor Trend said it changes direction like a much smaller car, which is impressive for 3,050 pounds of Kansas City assembly. It was sophisticated, composed, European, with an asterisk the size of Michigan. The Prelude's character was pure Honda drama. Below 6,000 RPM, it was a refined coupe your grandmother could drive. Then VTEC kicked in. And yes, VTEC actually kicked in. That's not just internet folklore. and the engine note changed from pleasant hum to mechanical symphony. The power delivery sharpened. The exhaust note got angry. You suddenly remembered why Honda fanatics talked about VTEC like it was a religious experience. The chassis was nose-heavy but predictable. The shifter was mechanical perfection. This was a car that rewarded commitment and punished hesitation. When magazines compared them in 1998, nobody could decide who won, because both cars were equally excellent and equally doomed. Car and driver praised the Contour SVT's chassis, but roasted the interior for feeling like a rental car. Motor Trend loved the Prelude's VTEC drama but wished for torque that arrived before retirement age. Both hit 60 in 6.9 seconds. Both ran 15s in the quarter. Both cost $23,000. Both had manual transmissions. On paper, dead heat. In reality, both lost to the Ford Explorer. But here's where specifications met reality and reality won. The Contour SVT was a 4-door sedan. The Prelude was a 2-door coupe. That distinction mattered more than Ford anticipated. American buyers who wanted performance sedans in 1998 bought BMWs. American buyers who wanted performance coupes bought Japanese. The Contour SVT was competing in a segment that America had decided didn't exist. The Prelude was competing in a segment that was already dying. Both were late to funerals they didn't know were happening. Production numbers read like obituaries. Ford built approximately 11,448 Contour SVTs from 1998 to 2000. That's fewer than 4,000 per year, which is terrible even by niche performance sedan standards. Honda moved roughly 58,000 fifth-generation Preludes globally from 1997 to 2001. Better, but still anemic for Honda. The Prelude outsold the Ford 5-1. Which sounds impressive until you realize both were commercial disasters. It's like comparing two different styles of drowning. Let's give Ford credit where it's due. And trust me, that's rare. The Duratec V6 was legitimately advanced for 1998. Aluminum construction, variable intake runners, double overhead cams. This wasn't some pushrod dinosaur from the Pleistocene era. This was modern engineering that proved Detroit could build sophisticated power plants when executives weren't high on spreadsheets. The problem? Ford couldn't convince Americans that a V6 Contour was worth more than a V8 Mustang. The engineering was brilliant. The marketing was laughable. Honda's VTEC system was engineering genius wrapped in marketing gold. Variable valve timing and lift electronic control used 2 cam profiles per valve. Mild for low RPM economy, aggressive for high RPM violence. Below 5,800 RPM, you got a sensible 4-cylinder. Above that, oil pressure locked rocker arms to wild cam lobes, and suddenly, you had a race motor. It was 2 engines in one body, like Jekyll and Hyde, but both personalities were fast. Brilliant engineering, brilliant marketing. Americans still bought CRVs instead. Take a breath, because this is where it gets tragic. By 1999, America had collectively decided that sedans and coupes were for Europeans and suckers. The Ford Explorer proved Americans would pay sedan money for truck-based SUVs with worse fuel economy and handling. The Honda CR-V was selling faster than Honda could stamp sheet metal. Performance coupes and sports sedans? Those were niche products for people who read magazines and cared about cornering. The Contour SVT and Prelude represented peak late 90s performance and peak late 90s irrelevance. Americans wanted high seating positions, not low-slung sports cars with manual transmissions. Ford killed the entire Contour line after 2000 like it was putting down a sick dog. Sales had disappointed. Profits were non-existent. The SVT variant? It lost money on every unit sold, which Ford's accountants found deeply offensive. Ford's bean counters looked at spreadsheets that showed red ink and made the obvious decision: murder it. The Contour SVT's replacement? There wasn't one. Ford tried again with the Focus SVT, a hot hatch for people who'd given up on sophistication. The European sports sedan dream, dead and buried in Kansas City. Honda discontinued the Prelude after 2001 with all the ceremony of canceling a magazine subscription. Sales were declining annually as buyers shifted to the Accord Coupe, which offered more space and less character. The Prelude had become too expensive and too niche for a company that wanted to sell reliable transportation to responsible adults. Honda's sports car lineup was shifting to the S2000 for hardcore masochists and nothing for everyone else. The Prelude, a high-revving four-cylinder coupe with a manual transmission, didn't fit Honda's new strategy of build sensible things that make money. Another legend, executed by spreadsheets. These two cars represented something genuinely important, and America completely missed it. The Contour SVT proved Ford could engineer a chassis as good as anything wearing a BMW roundel. The Prelude proved Honda could extract absurd specific output without grenading engines after 60,000 miles. Both were statements. Both were technical achievements. Both were ignored. Because by 1998, Americans had decided that performance meant big and tall and truck-based. Sports sedans and coupes were for people who read magazines and couldn't afford real SUVs. Today, the Contour SVT is automotive trivia. There's a small, dedicated community that keeps these cars alive, mostly through denial and junkyard scavenging. Finding clean examples? Good luck. Most were driven hard, modified by people who watched The Fast and the Furious once, or scrapped when repair costs exceeded the car's value by thousands. The survivors are curiosities, reminders of when Ford briefly remembered how to make something interesting. Clean examples are appreciating. Slowly. Very slowly. They'll never be icons. They're just forgotten proof that Ford tried once. The Prelude's legacy is stronger but equally sad. Clean fifth-generation examples command respect in Honda circles. That H22A VTEC engine is legendary for swaps into lighter chassis. But the Prelude as a complete car? It's remembered more as an engine donor than as an actual car you'd want to own. Prices are climbing for unmolested Type SH models. Collectors are realizing these were Honda's last pure sport coupes before everything became crossovers and safety regulations. But they're not Integra Type R money. They're just appreciated by people with functioning memories. Here's what disappeared when these cars died. Naturally aspirated engines that made power without turbo lag or computer intervention. Manual transmissions that shifted with mechanical precision instead of feeling like video game controllers. Sports sedans and coupes that were fast enough to be exciting but not so fast you'd end up explaining yourself to a judge. Both the Contour SVT and Prelude were just right. Quick enough, capable enough, engaging enough, without being excessive or expensive or requiring a lawyer on retainer. What replaced them? Absolutely nothing. Ford went hot hatch with the Focus ST and RS, which were brilliant but expensive. Honda abandoned sport coupes entirely, and now builds crossovers for people whose greatest automotive aspiration is reliable transportation. The Accord Coupe died in 2017. There's no Prelude successor. Today's performance cars either cost $45,000, or they're SUVs pretending to be sporty. The market for $23,000 naturally aspirated sport coupes with manual transmissions? Extinct. Gone. Buried under a mountain of rental spec crossovers. The Contour SVT versus Prelude wasn't really a battle. It was two different paths to the same doomed destination. Ford said, "We can build European sophistication." Honda said, "Displacement is for people who can't engineer properly." Both were correct. Both built genuinely excellent cars, and both lost, not to each other, but to market forces neither could control. Americans didn't want sports sedans or high-revving coupes. They wanted Explorers with 3-row seating and cup holders for their Starbucks. 6.9 seconds to 60. 6.9. 15.3 seconds in the quarter mile. 200 horsepower. Manual transmissions. $23,000. These weren't Corvette numbers. These weren't Viper numbers. But they were honest numbers that proved Detroit and Japan could build genuinely competitive performance cars without resorting to turbochargers or V8s. And America bought Explorers instead. The numbers were identical. The execution was brilliant. The market response was crickets. What did Detroit learn from the Contour SVT? That Americans don't want European sophistication from American brands. They want horsepower, torque, and V8 rumble. Ford killed the Contour SVT and built the F-150. That strategy made Ford billions. The lesson was crystal clear. Don't try to out-Europe the Europeans. Don't try to be sophisticated. Build trucks. Big trucks. Bigger trucks. And when you run out of truck ideas, build trucks with heated cup holders. Sophistication doesn't pay the bills. F-150s do. What did Honda learn from the Prelude? That sport coupes were dying, and denial wouldn't save them. The Accord Coupe offered 90% of the performance with better practicality. The S2000 offered pure sports car thrills for people who hate comfort. The Prelude sat awkwardly between them. Too expensive to be practical, too compromised to be pure. Honda killed it and focused on what Americans actually bought. CR-Vs, pilots, and Accords for people whose idea of excitement is adaptive cruise control. The Prelude died so Honda's profit margins could live. Harsh, smart, sad. 2 cars, 2 philosophies. 2 completely different ways to make 200 horsepower and hit 60 in 6.9 seconds. One used a V6 and European suspension tuning. The other used a 4-cylinder and VTEC sorcery. Both were brilliant. Both were doomed. Both disappeared within 3 years. The Contour SVT versus Prelude wasn't a rivalry. It was synchronized drowning. They didn't compete against each other. They competed against Americans' collective decision that performance meant sits high and holds 7 people. And they lost. If you find a clean Contour SVT or 5th-generation Prelude today, buy it. Not because they're investments, not because they're fast. Buy them because they represent the last time Detroit and Japan built naturally aspirated, manually shifted, affordable performance cars that were genuinely matched. 6.9 seconds, 200 horsepower, $23,000. That formula is extinct. These cars are fossils. Beautiful, functional, forgotten fossils. And fossils deserve better than junkyards. Unlike the Ford Explorer, which absolutely belongs in one. If you enjoyed watching 2 brilliant cars lose to market stupidity, smash that subscribe button. We've got more forgotten battles, more extinct species, and more stories about cars that were too good for the markets that killed them. Up next, another American attempt at sophistication that ended exactly how you'd expect. This is Car Chronicles. Don't be the guy who bought an Explorer instead.